first draw the graph of y equals to g of x. Let's look at this graph, negative 2x, y equals to negative 2x. What's that graph? Y equals to negative 2x. This has y-intercept 0, and it has a slope of negative 2. If you have a negative slope, is it slanted this way or this way? Which one? Down,
Yeah.
right? Negative slope means it's a decreasing graph. So I know that it's something that's going down, and it has a steepness of 2. So it's like rise is negative 2 and run is 1. And since y-intercept is 0, it passes through the origin, so you have this graph like that. You knew how to draw this, right? It's not hard. Okay, and then you have y equal to x. Y equal to x is this graph, 45-degree line. That's such a common graph that you should just know. But then before 0, only y equals to negative 2x is valid and this is not valid. Right? Before x is 0, only this is valid. Now after 0, only this is valid and this is not valid. So you end up with a graph that's like this. And I would say it's like a V shape, but it's a little crooked because the left side is steeper than the right side. The right side is just 45 degrees, but the left side is steeper. So that's the graph that you get. So that's the answer for A. Now this question mixes up the piecewise functions and all kinds of transformations. So what kind of transformation is applied to this function to get to here? Okay, well, you know, when you see this, you kind of wish that this was plus x, right? Because negative kind of throws you off, right? So let's think about this. Let's think about from y equals to g of x for b. You start from here, and then you move to y equals to g of 2 plus x plus 3. And by the way, addition is commutative, so you can write this as x plus 2 plus 3. Okay. And then from there, you finally replace x by negative x. And then I'm going to ask the transformations from each arrow. In this first arrow here, going from here to there, you went from x to x plus 2 plus 3. What kind of transformation is this? This is left 2, up 3. Right? This is left 2 steps, up 3. In other words, it's a translation. Or it's a shifting. A shifting of this graph, left 2 steps, up 3 steps is what you get. Got it? Okay. So the graph of this portion here, is the origin that was in here shifts 1, 2 steps left, and then 1, 2, 3 steps up, and then you get this graph, this crooked V shape. That's the graph. Then you went from x to negative x. What kind of transformation is that? If you go from x to negative x, what's the transformation? Flip over what? I told you to use this, right? X, negative x, y, negative y, right? So if you replaced x by negative x, you did this. What's happening? X went to negative x, so you did this. What is that? Flip over y-axis. It's a reflection over the y-axis. This is reflection over y-axis. So that means what you do is you take this and imagine a mirror at y-axis and see what happens at the mirror image, right? Sometimes it helps you if you think that it's not a nasty math problem, it's just a drawing problem for elementary school kids, and it's easy. Right? So you have this graph, and you want to make a mirror image over this side. How do you do that? Instead of going left by 2, you would go right by 2, right? And this would now be copied over here. Now you have this shape, that's going to give you this. You have this steeper one, will give you that. Right? So the answer to part B, no, let me draw the A and B carefully. A is steep 90 degrees. B would be go 1, 2 steps, go 1, 2, 3 steps up, and you get this graph and you get a steep graph. So that's the graph for B. All right. Now let's try the part C. Okay. So you start from y equals to g of x. If you have something multiplied to the function, I advise you to do that transformation first. Okay, so I want this to be y equals to negative 2g of x. And only after doing that you do y equals to negative 2g of x minus 1 plus 2. Okay, let's try to think about each of these transformations. First, if you put a negative in front of g, what happens? If you put a negative in front of the function, what happens to the graph? It will reflect over the x-axis. All the values become negative. So it's going to become upside down. So this graph will become upside down. What does this 2 do? It will stretch more in the y-axis, and which means that it will look more narrow. It will look thinner because you're stretching more. Okay. So what you get for this graph is first you have upside down, and you stretch this twice, so you end up with something that's narrower. So that's the graph. You know, if that's not too satisfactory, then let's do the following. Let's break this up even further. That might be easier. Okay? So if what I explained didn't make sense to you, then try to think about it like this. First, y equals to g of x, and then y equals to twice negative 2 of g of x. And the first one is reflect over x-axis, and this is stretch twice in y direction. Twice in y direction, okay? So for C, what you have is you start with the original graph, flip it upside down, and that's y equals to negative g of x. You stretch twice, so you get, this is stretched, so becomes, both sides will become steeper. That's what you get. Okay, from here to the last step, what is this step? you replace x by x minus 1. What does that do? Replacing x by x minus.
Is that transformation?
Yeah,
Then
it's
then
translation. So
right
what
one.
does replacing x by x minus 1 do?
Right 1.
Right 1 and then
Up 2.
up 2. Okay? So what you get is you go 1 step right and 2 steps up, and you copy this graph, so you get this. Okay? So the final answer for C would be 1, 1, 2, and it will be actually the slope here will be 2, so it's going to pass through here, and that would be the graph.